ROUVY Unchained.
Hello and welcome to ROUVY Unchained. I'm your host, Zach Nehr, and today we are taking you inside one of Europe's most popular cycling destinations. It might be the most popular cycling destination that I know of, especially among pro cyclists. We are going to Girona, Spain. And joining us today is Rafael Raymundo from Love Velo. Welcome to the show, Rafael. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Zach. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So I've never been to Girona before. I'm based here in the US, but I've heard so much about this location and I've heard so much about the famous climbs and I've seen all the pictures and the rides on Strava and everything. Can you give us just sort of an introduction to Girona?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe Girona is just perfect for everybody, all abilities, and anyone who's sort of looking to do different types of cycling, from road cyclists, gravel cyclists, and in some even cases going for mountain biking as well. There's just something for everybody at the end of the day, from short rides, longer rides, and heading towards the coast, mountains. Girona just seems to be the perfect place, and there's a reason why it's so popular for all cyclists.
Do you know when this popularity kind of started for Girona? Because is it something that is more recent, kind of the huge growth in popularity?
Difficult to say when to pinpoint the time. I started cycling in Girona in 2017, and it was, still known, but up and coming in that kind of destination, certainly for road cycling. But you've had pros there, in the days of Hincapi, riding up the typical climbs, way before Girona sort of blew up. So certainly a lot of pros put it on the map, and people followed on, just finding different ways to make cycling training enjoyable.
What is Girona like as a city? I imagine it's not quite as big as Barcelona or Madrid, but it's also not a small town. Is it kind of somewhere in between?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit in between. From the times I stayed there, it's sort of a perfect length where you can walk across the main center of town and the old town. You've got everything that you need there. So it's literally doorstop riding. That's one of the most favorite things about Girona, is that you can literally get on the bike, and no matter which direction you head out, you're getting some great rides.
And you said doorstop riding. Forgive me for being American for a second, but I don't understand. So what is doorstop riding exactly?
Literally from your door, you can start riding. So you don't have to travel out. I live in London, for example. It takes me at about 30 minutes, 45 minutes just to get out of the city, where you have to go through the traffic lights. And in Girona, it's 10, 15 minutes and you're in the countryside lanes. And you can experience the climb Els Angles, which is just outside of town, in less than 10 minutes.
Oh, so the actual center of Girona, how big would you say that is? You said in London it takes you at least 3 or 4 times as long to get out of the city. Is Girona, is it because it's a smaller city, or is it more having to do with like the infrastructure, or are there bike lanes or kind of easier ways to get out of town?
Yeah, so I think it's a mixture of both. You've got great infrastructure for most cases to get out of town, but also how small it is. You can walk Old Town in 15 minutes or so, and then sort of the center of town within 20 minutes walking distance everywhere. And it's just that perfect balance, as I mentioned. It's not as big as Barcelona. You don't have to take transportation to get from one part of the city to the next. You can literally walk it or even cycle it along the way.
Okay, so for someone who would be visiting Girona, it sounds like they wouldn't need a car at all.
Yes, you can reach a lot of things just by walking from your doorstep.
And for someone who is coming outside of the country, outside of Spain to Girona, is there a big airport in Girona, or do people fly into a different bigger city like Barcelona and then go from there?
For anyone traveling from Europe, you have Girona Airport, which is great. It's like a 10, 15-minute drive away if you get a taxi, or even a local bus 25 minutes away. So that's one of the best ways to get into Girona. From Barcelona, you've got the international airport, which is great too. And there's high-speed trains really that can run 45 minutes from Barcelona Central Station all the way to Girona itself. So it's so accessible.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear more about these trains because being in America, this is something very foreign to me. Like we have a couple train systems in like a few of the biggest cities, and they're not that great. They're not super fast. They're just super complicated. But like in Europe and so many other places, it sounds just so much easier and faster and more efficient. So is there, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that and how that is in and around Girona and that area?
Yeah, so from the terminal, you can catch a train to Barcelona city center or Barcelona Sants. And at the times when I was doing this commute, I would just hop to the next platform, and there'll be local trains that to Girona train station itself. Or you can pre-book ahead the fast train, which takes between 35 minutes to 45, and essentially there's less stops. It's a lot more direct compared to the local trains. The local train itself is great because you can put a bike, wherever it's built or not, you can put a bike box on the trains. And for the fast train, you have to sort of pre-book luggage just to make sure you can get.
Sounds great. Is there, are there other things in and around Girona that are almost built for cyclists like that, or almost built to accommodate cyclists in different ways?
When I first got there in 2017, I couldn't believe how cycling friendly it was. And certainly now you have such a big range of hotels there with a cycling bike room, maybe a wash center. And then I think the best thing is just the services that you get there. So you've got cycling cafes and certainly group rides that the stores will put on sort of a nightly basis throughout the week. So it is just cycling centric, and it just makes it a lot easier for anyone looking to ride in a new town they've never experienced before. Chances are you'll bump into another cyclist along the bridges or on a ride, and you get talking, and then you end up going for another ride and chilling at the cafe after.
Yeah, have you ever seen any like big name professional cyclists or any like professional teams on a training camp around Girona?
I admit I'm not so much in the pro scene, but it's. I remember the time when the whole EF Education First team was based in Girona, and you got a little sneak peek of the brand new Cannondale at the time, the Lab 71 Cannondale. So I'm not a fast rider, so I could be doing a normal ride, and you just see a whole peloton scream up the Els Angles climb, for example, just doing repeats. No, it's almost an everyday occurrence if you're riding out there that you will spot someone during the wintertime training.
And when it comes to that with the winter training and the teams doing their camps there, is there ever a time where either there's certain sections of road or especially like a certain climb that ever becomes too crowded? Because I've heard so much about these climbs and how popular they are, and you just see that you go on Strava on these some of these KOMs and there's tens of thousands of people, and it's like in the middle of winter if everyone's there. Is it ever too busy at a time?
I would personally say it's never that busy where you reach the summit and you're just surrounded by people. And I've been there during the sort of the peak times of April, May, June, and certainly in the autumn as well. It's nothing like you'd suggest, say, Mallorca, for example, where you go to the famous climb of Sacalobra, and you just have hordes of cyclists descending down at certain times, and certainly trying to catch the good time to beat the buses. It's never been that busy in my personal experience. You'll see the odd cyclist coming along, of course, but I don't expect it to be that busy.
You mentioned the peak times of year. What would you say are the busiest times in Girona, or like not only the busiest times, but also what you would personally recommend is kind of the best time to go, whether it's like the weather is the best or the cost is the best or something like that.
I would definitely do the shoulder seasons, what we say, sort of the March, April period, and sort of September and October as well. I think you just getting sort of best value at the time. Combination of fantastic weather, warm enough. I apologize, but I will say in centigrade, you're looking at around mid 20s centigrade. I don't know what the conversions are on top of my head, but I'm sure we can edit that in. But it's just a combination of you getting great weather at the time, and there's certainly a sense of community with people coming in from all over, and also the local people sort of dusting off their winter bike and getting the summer bikes in.
And with as popular as Girona is nowadays, how far in advance would you say that you would need to book like accommodations or maybe a rental bike or something like that? Is it something where if you try to book something a month in advance, is there nothing left? Do you need to plan it a little bit more in advance than that?
I would say so. So at least 3 months in advance when it comes to planning things, to get the best availability. Girona, as I mentioned, is a small city, so it's not as well established as other destinations where you have multiple bike shops, you have multiple hotels that can accommodate a lot of people. It's at the end of the day, it's a small city, so there's a limited amount of places that you can stay that are cycling friendly, and certainly a few bike shops that have a small fleet to offer you. So the sooner you can book something, I'd say yeah, it's the best possible way.
And how expensive would you say Girona is, especially compared to kind of similar places like either a Calpe or even Tenerife?
If you compare it to say Tenerife, Mallorca, and Calpe, for example, I think it's just a touch more than you'd expect for that time of the year or length of stay. It's it's only because again, it's less places that offer it, so there's less competition. In Tenerife, you have multiple bike shops. Mallorca certainly a lot of bike shops, so there's a lot more competition and a lot more hotels. So it drives the prices a little bit lower in those destinations. But Girona still holds, is still relatively affordable.
Yeah, and I just thought of something as you were saying that, where here in the US, especially in the Midwest, where we have very extreme seasons, is that something that exists in Girona? Is there kind of like a most expensive time of year? And then if you go maybe a month or two outside of that, you can kind of get better prices?
So it's not extreme as you can't ride or anything. As they always say, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. Girona is still seasonal, so there's sort of great ways to where prices are lower. If you take the period of May, for example, where it gets a little bit busier, towards the end of April, you have the flower festival. Those peak times tend to push the prices up, as mentioned. But you can ride all year round in Girona if you've got enough layers. Of course, there's places in the mountains where it gets a little bit negative 0 degrees, so frozen, and you want to avoid sort of heading to those areas. But there's still plenty of good rides. I think back in 2021, we were at the beach celebrating my friend's birthday after a bike ride in December. So we were all wrapped up. We had layers, but we were still having beers and sunny days around the December period. You just got to get lucky. There's some days where it will be you're doing a gravel ride and it'll pour the entire day, and then now you're riding your gravel bike down a river where it usually be dry.
And how much does that weather change throughout the year? Like the peak of summer, is it ever too hot to ride in Girona, like somewhere around July or August?
Yes, I would suggest July and August gets a little bit too warm in Girona. It'll be time to head towards the mountains. I mean, the Pyrenees are not too far away from Girona itself. But you're expecting, 38 degrees Celsius kind of type of heat, and essentially it becomes a bit of a convection oven. I remember going down a uncovered road, so there's some climbs where there's no trees at all, and it just gets a little bit too hot to do a climb around that kind of temperature and that time of the year in July and August.
And you mentioned all those mountains and the climbs. Can you describe where Girona sits and how close some of those major climbs are? Is it like right on the edge of the mountains, like you get outside of town, you can go up an hour-long climb, or is it a little bit further outside of town?
It's for the bigger climbs that you mentioned that takes about an hour long. You do have to head further out town. Rocacorba is obviously the most famous one that you can find that is quite challenging. 7% grades and more for an average a number of kilometers. And San Martin Sacam, for example, is another challenging training ride, which is again not in the Girona town area. You still got to head towards west towards the mountains. Um, but for a good challenge, it's Els Angles, like 15 minutes away from your doorstep and essentially out of town, and you're starting climbing already.
So it sounds like there's a good mix, a good variety of these climbs where you can get those riders that they want to go uphill, but they don't want to climb a steep grade for an hour. And then there are those challenging longer climbs. would you say the terrain around Girona is quite mixed for someone who kind of just wants a casual like 1 hour ride, and then if they want to do 4 hours up in the mountains, tons of climbing, like there's those options kind of in the same area?
Yes, absolutely. No matter which direction you head off, you can find great cycling of different abilities as well. If you just wanted a casual ride, there's actually a ride that's in the shape of a kudos farm. And they are short, steady climbs of less than 5%, 3 kilometer climbs kind of thing. It's 60 kilometers long, and it's just great for a quick blast. And you can sort of hold your heart rate as you prefer, and just go as hard as you want or as slow as you want. It's up to you. But for bigger challenges, head over to Lake Banyoles towards the north, ride up Rocacorba, and send down.
Super cool. Is there, would you say there are any options for if someone came to Girona with their family and they had kids that just they want to go for a super casual ride, like no climbs, just super flat. Is there anywhere around the city that there's either a bike lane or a bike path or something like that that you could go on like a family like 2 or 3 mile ride?
Yeah, just it's actually starting within the city. You have these old narrow gauge lines, train lines that they've converted into sort of really compact champagne gravel style bike paths. You can actually take it all the way to the coast. So for sort of the older families there who just wants a casual bike ride, you can ride all the way to the coast and back on sort of really nice gravel roads, dedicated bike paths. And certainly around the Girona area, there's you can do like a 20-kilometer loop, for example, on those compact gravel rides.
That sounds really nice. And you mentioned Old Town before in Girona. Is
Mhm.
that is that the center of the city?
Yeah, it's a historic part. It's sort of surrounded by the wall, crossing over the River Onya from the center of town. You'll know it. As soon as you enter, you'll see the cobblestones, the narrow alleyways, and it's so good to just get lost in the old town. It's more commonly known more as the Baribel. I'm pretty sure I didn't pronounce that right, but it's great. It's obviously modern now with great places to go shopping, see a bit of art such as the museums. So plenty of places to see in the old town.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask for someone who is on a rest day, like let's say they do a longer trip to Girona and they have a bunch of like big days in a row, like 3, 4 hours, and then they need just a day off where they're just like walking around the city trying to find something to do. It sounds like the museums and shops, and I imagine there's good restaurants and coffee shops too.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite cafes actually is not in the old town itself, but near the Plaza de la Independencia. It's where most people go. It's a really small place to go, but they do sort of really fresh coffee and sort of ground in the day and sort of unique coffee at that point. And you just see sort of hordes of cyclists waiting outside in the morning, preparing for their morning bike ride. And you can just sit on the benches outside, or if you're lucky, get a seat in the inside as well. So there's a really good cafe culture in Girona, certainly. Biggest ones, Espresso Mafia, La Fabrica, where you can get some great food as well. It's been there for many years since I've been there.
This question just popped into my mind where I was thinking about kind of my daily routine and my schedule being in the Midwest in America. And then I have been to Spain once, and I was just blown away with some of the differences in the culture and especially the timing on a daily basis. I remember making dinner plans, and the dinner plans were at 11:30 p.m. And in my mind, I was like, wait, no, wait, that can't be right. There must be something wrong here. And we went to a different restaurant at 8 p.m. and it was closed. They opened at 9 for dinner, and it was just something that I'd never experienced before. Is there anything like that in Girona that people should know about, especially if they've never been there before?
No, well, you'll know if it's a reservation before 9 o'clock. It's definitely designated for tourists, but you have such a big range of restaurants out there. Yeah, you're right. Like you will see families until 10 in the evening, 11 in the evening, just together enjoying a meal. But majority, you can find a reservation at 7 o'clock, 7:30. If you're, yeah, make it 8 o'clock to make it safe. Plenty of restaurants in the old town itself, you'll see around that time people walking around in the main squares. You'll find a lot of tables out there ready to take walk in as well. So you don't have to make a reservation, for example.
And one other thing that I've heard about is the like shops, restaurants, grocery stores like closing in the afternoon. Is that something that happens in Girona, or do they stay open because there's more tourists there?
I think in general it's still a working town, so they tend to stay open throughout the afternoon. You won't be too far away from a shop for groceries. You'll have a grocery store within 10 minutes walk of each other. It's just so well serviced. So there's plenty of places to get food throughout the afternoon. I don't think you'd have to worry about the grocery stores shutting during the afternoon.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Is when it comes to the food, is there anything that is like one of your favorites or something that you've only seen in Girona or only seen in Spain that every time you go you just have to get it?
I remember there's a stint where I discovered this particular little pastry. It's known in Catalan as a chusu, I believe, and it's like a croissant with lots of sugar crystals that just dusted on top. So a really sugary croissant, and for a big ride, it's a good way to start the day of to get the sugar in and the carbs in straight away.
That sounds super good. Is that something that is like a specialty at like a single shop, or is that something that you can kind of find like all around the city?
Yeah, you can find it in the local bakeries there. It's fairly common. It's a great for so Catalan pastries.
That sounds super good. When it comes to the kind of the infrastructure and the accommodations in Girona, is there a mix between like if you wanted to stay in high-end luxury, is there anything like that there? And if you wanted to stay in like just classic Spanish, like the old architecture, that kind of thing, is there a range of places that you can stay and see in Girona?
Yes, I would say so. If you're looking for sort of high-end luxury, you would have to stay outside of town for the luxurious stays, more in the Costa Brava region. But there's quite a few boutique apartments in within the Girona Old Town as well. But usually you can get anything between 2 star and all the way up to 4 star hotels that are cycling friendly, and quite a good choice around there.
That's really nice. And when it comes to I've heard a lot about the cars, and you said it's so bike friendly there. Is it even when you're in the city, when you said like the first 10, 15 minutes trying to get out of town, is it something where the cars are very, very kind and very accommodating to cyclists? Because this is something that like in America, like it totally depends on the city. There's some cities where like I would never ride my bike in downtown, like way too dangerous, way too sketchy. But then you go to other places, and especially in Europe, where it's like there's so much space and the cars will stop for you, and it's like no stress at all. Would you say Girona's like on that end of the spectrum?
I would say it's in that safe end of the spectrum. I mean, it's there's a mutual respect between the locals and cyclists, and if and they have a rule of 2.5 meters passing. So it's rare for a car to pass really close by and really fast. They really do respect cyclists, and hopefully vice versa, that the cyclists respect the locals. There'll be certainly in the old town there'll be sort of one-way systems. It would be nice if you obey the rules of following the one-way systems and walking your bike where you're not permitted to ride them. And then there is that sense of community where you can just feel about the drivers and the cyclists and vice versa, that you feel safe on the road. I don't think I've had any instances in the 5 or 6 years I've been cycling during at the time where I felt unsafe.
That's great to hear. Is you mentioned there's some places where you're not allowed to ride your bike where you have to walk instead. Is that yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because in most cities like in America, like we don't really have that. I mean, you can kind of bike anywhere, but at the same time it's probably not safe to bike everywhere. But like in Girona, is it like a city square or certain roads that you're not allowed to ride?
Yes, in a sense that there's some shortcuts that you can make to get to your hotel, for example, where it's also shared use by people walking. So that's where the safety comes in. The last thing you want is a cyclist going at like 20 miles per hour, for example, and not really taking care of where they're going. So it's usually within the old town, of course, and near the squares of Girona, where it's best if there's a lot of people just to walk the bike. In a sense, it's just safer for everybody. You never know what's around the corner, essentially. And you'll see the signs where they say no cycling is allowed. And in some cases, that people, my friends, have been fined for cycling in places where they're not allowed to.
I was thinking about our other episode with Tenerife, how the location is so different, and especially on the longer rides, it gets so remote and you're so far outside of town. With Girona, once you get outside of town, when it comes to like if you have a mechanical or you need water or food or something like that, once you're, yeah, 10 or 20 miles outside of town, what is that like to find any assistance? Because I know in Tenerife it's like super remote. In Girona, is it a little bit busier but not too busy?
I'd say if you're 20 miles away, you are heading towards more remote areas. Not as extreme as Tenerife per se. You can still get taxis out to rescue you, but there are certainly small villages nearby, to or gas stations, for example. So if you, I've we've all been there. We've done a big ride and we haven't sufficiently fueled up for the big ride, and you rush into a gas station and you grab all the snacks, the drinks. You'll find that scattered around Girona itself and the main cycling routes that you go on. And you also find these cute little towns where there's either a cafe or a local bar where you can get a soft drink, a Coke or something along those lines, and maybe a tiny bit of tapas too. So I would say if you plan your journey correctly, you'll find a small town every 20 kilometers or so. So it's not as if you're fully remote and there's no hope for you if you ever have a mechanical. Um, I do have a funny story where my Di2 battery died 50 kilometers into a ride and is probably one of the remote places that you can go in a ride. It's near the dam, so there's not many places, not many villages in that area. And at that stage, you just have to call a friend or a taxi. So just, but how often does that happen when it comes to your Di2 battery dying?
Probably not too often, yeah. And when it comes to Girona versus other locations like Calpe, Tenerife, and Mallorca, what would you, how would you recommend someone kind of choosing between those options? Because they're all similar and different in many different ways, but what would you say is really stands out about Girona? Whereas if someone really loved that, then Girona's the destination for them.
That's like choosing between your children. I don't have children, but it's so difficult to choose between those destinations. I think, as mentioned, Girona has what makes Girona special in a sense. It's the community there. I think there's such a strong base of community in that region, um, compared to some other places where, say, Tenerife or Mallorca, where it's just a lot of cyclists coming there for training. There's some great rides. Certainly, when I was there, when Castelli opened their store, they did a inaugural sort of ride, and it was a gravel ride in the evening at night time. And I've never experienced that anywhere else. In maybe I've not been to many places, but I've never experienced that in Mallorca or anywhere else. Where you turn up at the shop, you go for a gravel night ride, and it's literally 2 meters in front of you, or 6 feet in front of you, is your white light, and then you're following a red dot and hoping for the best as you're descending some random gravel road and hoping it doesn't turn into a forest. And it's rained the night before, so it's all wet and you're splashing mud everywhere, and things like that hasn't really happened in other destinations. So I think it's all down to the community in that region. As you mentioned, there's a lot of ex-pros living there, and a lot of sort of social cyclists in that region with YouTube channels, and there's always something going along in Girona itself.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear more about the gravel. Are there tons of options around Girona? And like, how would you recommend planning out those routes? Is it something that you can find on Strava or something similar like that? Or is it more you kind of have to use a map and take some guesses, you might get lost, one of those things?
This goes back to when I was exploring gravel for the very first time. So I learned to gravel ride in Girona, and it was one of the hardest rides of my life because essentially my Strava profile looked like a tree or your lungs, where so many dead ends, so many 20% climbs with rocks. Now I don't want to scare anybody gravel because I didn't realize at the time, but there's some great gravel riders out there. There used to be a shop, and the service course which did the gravel bonanza, and over time you get to learn the special routes which work for gravel bikes. And I was doing it on 32 millimeter tires, slicks at the time. So certainly now there's a better infrastructure. Here at Love Velo, we can provide the gravel tracks, and if you look around in the main shops such as Velodrome, there's a big following there for gravel. So it's always nice to get a chat with anyone there. I'm sure they'd love to talk to you about gravel in Girona and even share some sort of their personal rides in that region. It's north, south, east, west. You can do some gravel rides from sort of champagne gravel, as I mentioned, for the family, where you can follow an old gauge railway track all the way to 20% cross country style, and of course the tracker. It's hosted there. Is pretty much unbound gravel in Europe. It's hosted there on a yearly basis, so gravel is endless in that region.
You mentioned that Love Velo can help with providing those routes. Is that something where you kind of have a list of like ride files that you can just send to different people or different things that you can recommend?
Yeah, so we provide it in a Ride with GPS app. So you don't need a cycling computer. You can just use your mobile phone. But you can also download all those to GPX files, and that's accepted through most Garmin's, Wahoo, and more different types of cycling computers. So it's really easy. As soon as you've booked the trip, you get a list of gravel rides for the gravel trips, and essentially the varying distances. So it sets you up to do a little um, recce ride and just see how it looks like and prepare yourself for Girona. And then it ramps up to different rides of over 100 kilometers and technicality as well. So
That sounds super cool. And another quick note to our listeners, the routes in Girona, you can actually ride them on the ROUVY app. We have a whole list of those. So if you're thinking about visiting Girona, you can check out some of the routes on there from the comfort of your own home and kind of look at some of the different climbs and different roads. I hope there's some gravel rides on there because it sounds really exciting. I mean, here in the Midwest, we have very basic, very flat gravel roads where it's like it's gravel, but there's not like switchbacks and descents and like different surfaces. It's just like, here's a mile of straight flat gravel in Wisconsin.
I mean, Zach, how do you describe gravel anyway? Ask anybody what gravel is, and you get a million different answers. So it's one of those things like or anything off road is gravel at the end of the day.
That's very true. Yeah. Something like Unbound in Kansas, which is long, flat, like rolling hills, nothing super technical. And then I've done other stuff where it's just like you're going down this 15% descents and then it turns into dirt and then you're on single track. You're like, is this mountain bike? No, no, it's a gravel race, but there's a mountain bike single track for 5 miles. It's like, oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah, I'm definitely hair raising moments and try to keep upright, unclipping and skidding down Rocacorba, for example. There's a hidden gravel section in Rocacorba. Most people know that there's only one way up Rocacorba, but there's a gravel side to it too.
Okay. So yeah, tell me more about that. Is that you said is it up or down or both, the gravel part?
It's both. You can sort of ride up Rocacorba itself. It's lesser known. It's not something that you can sort of find because it's not being gate kept. It's just there's a bit of technicality, and it's one of those things. If or if you go in a group ride with a friend who's done it before, then it's a bit certainly a challenge for you.
That's all super cool. So I have one last question for you. And I've asked this one to the other Love Velo guests that we've had, and we've gotten some really good answers about this one. So I'm really excited to hear what it is for Girona. So if you had a cyclist who maybe they're on a family trip or they're just coming through town and they're there for just one day in Girona and they only have one day to do one ride, what is the route that you would recommend for them?
I would definitely just do the Els Angles ride, and then loop it back around to what we call the Hincapi loop. And I'm going to pronounce this really wrong, Santa Pelea. And essentially, you get the best of everything. get into some good climbing, some good countryside rides, and at the top, on a clear day, you can see Costa Brava, so the sea, and you can see the Pyrenees as well. And it's where the church where Salvador Dali got married. So plenty of things to see in that region. The riding is great, of course, and it's from the doorstep, as I mentioned, of Girona, and you're back in 65 kilometers or less.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I want to fly out and do it tomorrow. It sounds so awesome.
Let's go. Let's book our flight today and
Yeah. Especially with the weather here, I just want to get out and ride outside on some nice roads.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I miss it completely. But that's, if it was my day, I gotta give a shout out to the local cafes out there where you can sort of begin your ride and then come back for a breakfast burrito as well to cap it off.
That sounds so good. Yeah. So where can people follow along and learn more about Love Velo?
So you can find our website at lovevelo.travel. We do a range of trips, certainly Girona being one of them, gravel road, but we have something for everybody. Everybody in this group is a cyclist. So even if you're not sure, we're happy to guide you along the type of trip that would be best suited to you. And yeah, give us a call.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Raphael. It was great to have you on.
Appreciate it, Zach.
All right. That's all from this episode of ROUVY Unchained. Thank you for listening and see you next time.